So I'd like you to imagine a scenario where you walk up to a ball in, let's say this situation, and you think about the result that you'd like, and you walk in, you execute it, walk up there with your putter and tap it in. You don't walk up to the golf ball worrying about thinning it or fatting it or being nervous over the golf ball. Well, that can be the reality, because these shots don't have to be that difficult, but very often they are. There's a few reasons why they're difficult, but we can sort of get rid of those today, give you some really simple things to help you hit some basic chip shots a lot better. So the first thing would be, what is the type of shot we're trying to hit? How would we categorize it? And then how do we reflect that in our setup? So I would class this as a finesse shot. It's a touch, it's a feel shot. It's not a power shot. So if I set up this golf ball, take a wide stance, get myself into this posture where my legs are strong and I've engaged my core, everything about that setup to me screams power, speed, force. Great for driver, not great when we're hitting a little finesse shot. So how are we ever going to hit those lovely shots where we feel it in our hands, we've got great touch, if before we even move the club away, our brain is feeling and sensing power, I'm going to create speed and energy? It's not going to happen. So we have to think about how our setup reflects the shot we're trying to hit. My setup is going to feel softer. I'm going to be closer to the golf ball. My arms are going to be straight, but comfortably straight, not extended or locked. I'm going to be probably stood a little bit closer to the golf ball. And just relaxing the body a little bit more is a great place to start. And that's going to get you off to, with any luck, a better start to the shot. And then we can start to build on top of that. So the key with all short game shots is strike. If you can't strike the ball consistently, you're never going to get good results and you're never going to have confidence. And that's really where people kind of fall down. Their strike isn't consistent. So let's take a setup with this golf ball, and long term you'd really love the ability to change the trajectory of your shots, but we're just going to talk about a really basic chip shot. I'm going to set up, ball is going to be pretty much in the middle of me, and my club shaft, give or take, is going to be pretty neutral. There's going to be a little bit of lean in there. The club, obviously at this point, is resting on the ground. Now think about the distance between my chest or the buttons or the zip on your top and the bottom of the club. That distance we're going to call the swing radius. Now as I take a setup, watch what happens to that golf club if I push my hands forwards. You can see how the club head is raised up off the ground. What happens if I move my hands backwards? Same thing, club is raised off the ground. So if I take an address where my arms are comfortably straight, the club shaft is vertical and the club rests on the ground, I have to return the club to there. If I don't, if I return the club with any kind of forward shaft lean, I shorten that distance. Therefore, I bring the top of the ball into the equation. If I bring my hands back, same thing, the club brings up higher, I'm going to bring that top into the equation. So many of the shots that you hit which aren't struck particularly well, it's because the golf club is being returned at a different angle to what it was at address. Now, how do I, if I have that angle, how do I get the club down to the ball if I've got this angle? Well, I increase the flex in my knees. So how many of you have hit shots where you felt yourself dipping down into the shot? That's the reason. It's your brain kicking in to say, I need to do something, otherwise I'm going to top this ball along the ground. But I actually struck that pretty well, but it's never going to be consistent. So we have to make sure that the club is returning to the place where you set it at address. As you start to become more advanced in your short game, if you want to start putting the ball back and having the club shaft length forwards, fine, but the same thing applies. I have to return it to there. I can't return it further forward than it was at address. So the club at impact should always be the same place that it was at address. That's really important. Now the next point is to do with the body rotation, the body turn. We could be hitting this shot over a 10 to 15 yard distance, really short. And because it's a short shot, it often feels like we don't need to use the body. We do, there is a body pivot. Watch what happens if I take my address, and we're touching on that kind of swing radius again. Watch what happens if I don't re-engage my body. I'm going to use my hands and my arms, and that club is going to get lifted and my arms are going to very quickly lose their structure. Notice how my trail arm is very bent. Even my lead arm is bent because my arm can't really move across my chest and stay straight. So if I don't use my body, I'm going to move the club with my hands and my arms, and ultimately my hands end up closer to my chest. So what we've done is we've taken that nice setup with the club resting on the ground, we've created our radius and we have reduced it. So again, we're back into that same scenario where I've got to now drop my knees or I've got to try and push my arms down. And when we start to do those things, we start to get all sorts of different interactions with the ground and different movements that we don't want. So we have to use a body pivot. Take your golf club, pop it across your shoulders. And when we're hitting these short shots, I want you to feel like your shoulders, your torso, your hips, your knees are actually rotating pretty much at the same rate. So as my shoulders turn, my hips turn, my knees turn. Yes, it's an upper body controlled movement, but the lower body reacts to that. So you'll notice as I'm making these little simulations that there is rotation through my body. If I've got that rotation, what it allows my arms to do is maintain the relationship that they had at address. I don't have to change that distance, shorten that radius, and then push or force the hands back down towards the golf ball or where they were. So that little pivot in the body is absolutely key. And obviously as that shot gets a little longer, that pivot will get a little bit greater both sides. Now I appreciate you can't see this, but you can definitely feel this. When I'm doing that, we said the knees will be moving, or the ankles will be moving as well, and there will be pressure shifting between the feet. So as I'm making these rehearsals, I can feel right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. In the full swing, that shift of pressure is aggressive. There's force going on because we're trying to generate speed. In the short game, not quite the same. There is pressure, but it's more just a sort of lateral shift between the left and the right. In the full golf swing, we often put pressure sort of downwards and through that left side. So it's very different to the full swing, but we still need that pressure to be shifting. The worst short game players that I see, by far, are the ones who set up over the ball and the body, especially waist down, is static. There's no rotation, there's no shift of pressure, and we get all the arms doing all the work, and we get these really inconsistent strikes because the radius is continually changing. So I'd love you to feel it as a little body pivot, and I'd love you to feel that there's some movement in the feet as well. Now I've already spoken about touch and feel, really important. The chances are that as you make a little movement away from the ball, there will be some movement in your wrists. Fairly natural. We kind of want that because it gives a nice flow or rhythm to the swing. Watch what happens if I move my club back, add a little bit of wrist hinge, and then don't release that on the way through. What happens is club shaft is delivered with the handle forwards, club face is open, and going back to what we said earlier in the video, I've shortened that radius. So lots of the shots that you hit which are poor are because you will use a little bit of wrist on the way back, get a little bit nervy, not feel committed, hold that angle too much, never actually let the club go. I want you to feel the weight of the club head. When you've made your backswing and you've used a little bit of wrist, that's fine. Let the club head release. Let it swing freely. Let it land on the ground and then pass your hands on the other side. Only a small amount. We're not looking for excessive wrist action, but it helps with a little bit of flow and it helps with a little bit of rhythm. So it's important that we let that club release through. That's when grip pressure comes in, nice and light, feeling and sensing the weight of the golf club. Now here's a drill I'd love you to try. It's a difficult one, but it's one which I think is going to help you. And it's really enabling you to marry up the club, the arm and the body. So I'm going to take my setup, it's all going to look fairly normal. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to hit it one-handed. I'm going to take my lead hand, fingers on the bicep, pad on, see the logo there on my chest, and I want to hit shots where I feel like my hand stays in contact with those 2 points. If I get armsy, it comes away. That's a very, very different movement. If I do it correctly, notice how I'm able to control that connection with my rotation. Okay, now this ball won't reach that flag, but with any luck, I should be able to hit a pretty nice struck shot where the club, the arm and the body are working in sync. Okay, not far enough, that's fine. I wasn't trying to hit far enough, but the strike was good. So within reason, I sort of feel like I can hit a shot one-handed almost as good as I can with two hands, because that relationship is just staying the same and we're using our body pivot to control it, and I'm letting that club swing freely through impact. I've got beautiful interactions with the ground. I've got no divots, but I've hit the ground on every single shot because I'm using the sole of the golf club due to the fact that I've set the club shaft neutral at address. That's how you hit those lovely little shots how do you take it to the golf course? So putting that all into practice and actually coming out onto the course and hitting shots that end up close is all to do with where your focus is, making that external and also getting the plan right. So what can often happen, and what does often happen, is that we can get obsessed with our technique and we start to only think about what we're doing as the golfer. So we can start to stand over the ball and make sure our ball position is correct, and then make sure our setup is nice and relaxed, and making sure that we're letting that club release down at the bottom and we're moving our weight and our feet are feeling that, and we start to hit well executed shots, but clearly that's nowhere near the flag just because I didn't really get the right flight and the right carry and all that kind of stuff. So for me to actually perform on the course, yes, I've got to have the technique, and hopefully you've all got perfect techniques now, but I have to plan the shot out. I have to actually get external. So if I'm looking at hitting this shot to the flag at the back, how's it going to get there? Is it going to go on a mid-flight, a high flight, a low flight? Well, I'm going to try and visualize my mid-flight. Well, I then need to predict where it's going to land. It needs to land left of the flag because there's quite a severe slope on that green. And I'm trying to pick an area where that ball lands. What I'm then going to be doing is making my practice swings reflecting that shot. So I'm trying to, picture what I want to happen and then link that to a swing. So clearly, a swing like that wouldn't really relate to the shot that I'm trying to hit. So the more I can picture the shot, the more I can see the flight, see it land, see it release, see it roll, and start to feed that into my body and let that come out into the golf club, the more we're going to start to get a bigger connection between the shot and you. That's really, really important. So I'm making practice swings, seeing the shot, and you'll notice that after some of the practice swings, I'm almost still for a couple of seconds, because I'm really trying to picture everything about it. Once I feel like I've got that clear, I can then go ahead and execute. I've hit that a little bit too straight, I think. Yeah, so I needed that to be a little left. Distance was perfect. I just slightly I kind of read it correctly and just pushed it a little bit out to the right. But the shot that I wanted to hit was correct, and I can assess that. It's difficult. When you're going through changes in your technique, it's hard to stand here and only think external, which is where your practice time becomes really important. The change that you make to your technique, ideally, do those on the practice area, and when you come onto the golf course, you can just be focused on the flag. And when you can be focused on the flag and the shots, that's when you really start to hit some lovely shots and get up and down more often.